Hello! In this mini video we're going to be looking at the data types available for you to use in JavaScript, as well as the conditional control structures. In terms of data types, JavaScript has numbers, which includes both integers and floats. It doesn't make any distinction between the two. It has strings, and it has Boolean values, true or false. Functions and objects are examples of complex data types. Then null and undefined are examples of data types that can't take values at all. They're a bit weird, so we'll cover them in more detail in the classroom. In terms of conditional statements, these are quite familiar. If, else if, else if, else if, else if, else if, and else. I'll be going back to the example from my part 1 video, where the web page asked you to give your name, specify a number of dogs, and then it gives you a personalized greeting and the number of dogs that you requested. Now what I'd like to do is to use the console of the browser to investigate the data types of these various variables. But rather than modifying the code in the web page, I'm going to create a script snippet in the Chrome Developer Tools, which you can find underneath the Sources tab. This allows us to run some snippets of JavaScript independently and see immediately what appears in the console. I'm going to begin by copying the 2 lines where I assign to person name and num repeats the values returned by 2 user prompts. After that, I'm going to log on the console the values of those variables as well as their data types, which we can get by using this typeof operator. So after I run the snippet and enter a little bit of data, we can see that the value of person name is Chris, and of course is a string, but we can also see that the value of num repeats is 8, and that too is a string. Remember that we saw similar things when processing forms in PHP, where there was a difference between the integer 8 and a string containing the digit 8. We have a similar distinction here in JavaScript. Now, despite the fact that num repeats is actually a string, because the contents of it is easily converted to a number, JavaScript does this automatically for us when we pass it as the argument to the repeat string method. You can see here that for an input of 2, the dog code variable correctly stores a string with 2 image elements. The string containing 2 has been interpreted correctly. Now suppose that instead of asking the user how many dogs they want, we ask them how many extra dogs they want on top of the dog we're going to provide them. So we change the question, and now the value of num repeats should be 1 plus whatever the user entered. Now when we run the snippets and request 2 extra dogs, instead of getting 3 in total, we get 12. Why? Well, usually JavaScript would try and convert strings into numbers when numeric operations are involved, but in the case of the plus symbol, this isn't just addition, but also string concatenation. So in fact it converts the number 1 plus the string 2 into the string 1, 2, or 12. This string is then converted into the number 12 by the repeat string method. Thankfully, this situation is easily remedied by using the built-in number function, which converts the string representation of the number to an actual number. And this time when we run the code, you see that the answer we get is 3. So that's enough of messing around with the snippet. Let's go and add the code we wrote together into the web page itself. Now, while we resolved the bug that was due to an unexpected string concatenation, we're not actually checking any of the user's inputs. So they could enter an empty name or a non-numeric number, and the code would go ahead and try to work with them, giving us this output. This is a good excuse to introduce a conditional statement to check that the inputs are valid. So we're going to start by checking whether the person name is empty, and if it is, we'll display an error message in an alert box and reset the person name simply to world. As you'll now see, if I don't enter a name, I'll get an alert box telling me that I should enter one, and the screen displays hello world instead of hello blank. At the moment this condition only handles an invalid name. We want to enter this block of code if the name is invalid or the number is invalid. We're going to test this by using a function isNaN, or is not a number, which returns false if num repeats can't be converted to or treated as a number. With these situations now covered, I'm going to update the alert box message, and I'm going to reset the value of num repeats to 1. Finally, I'm adding an else block, which in practice will only be entered when the inputs are valid. So I'm going to move the thank you alert message into that, and I'm going to move the reassignment of num repeats into that too. With the coding complete, if we go back to the page and enter at least one invalid input, we will see this default page of hello world and a single picture of the dog. If we enter a name and we enter some digits, then we will see the customized page that we desire. As a small parting note, if you want to increase the value of a variable by 1, you can actually use ++, and this will work even if the value is of data type string. So that was a quick introduction into some data types of JavaScript, focusing in particular on booleans, strings, and numbers, which again makes no distinction between integers and floats. We had a go at running some JavaScript snippets in Google Chrome in the developer tools. We had a look at the issue of automatic type conversion and saw how the value returned by our prompt was a string, and yet it was being treated as a number. We also had a look at this one particular pitfall, where the plus operator between a number and a string leads to string concatenation. Finally, we validated some inputs using some simple conditional statements, if and else. See you next time.